Well, good morning and welcome to ELEVENSES with Kevin Williams, Survival Skills Rider Training. It is the 5th of December 2021. It's a moderately miserable looking day outside here in London at the moment. As usual, got a fairly packed show for you. Hopefully I won't freeze all the way through the presentation. What's going on? Yeah, we got it's I don't know what it is. It's I think it's broadband problems, but hey ho. We'll do our best as usual. Right. So what have we got for you in today's show? Well, we have a story about a ride out that didn't end in the way that the riders undoubtedly would have liked it to. We will be looking at I've forgotten what I've actually got set up today. Hang on a minute and I'll find out for you. Yes, BP are reintroducing mandatory masks if you're visiting one of their outlets. The RAC are demanding a cut in fuel prices. They say that the petrol at the pump is overpriced. Portsmouth is opening a clean air zone across the city, but the good news is it won't apply to motorcycles or cars at the moment. Motorcycle Live show news. BSA are back with a new Gold Star 650 single. I'll look at that in some detail. Triumph have rolled out their 1 millionth bike, and Norton showing off a naked cafe racer. And frankly, I wish they'd kept its clothes on, but hey ho, we'll come on to that in a moment. And Blood Bikers out in Hungary have covered no less than 183,000 kilometres in their first year of operation. We'll have a look at all those stories and we'll finish off with some better biking tips. I'll be talking about different types of rider training, as it's probably not the season for people to be riding too much. We can at least think about what we're going to do next year. So don't forget, if you've got any comments, any questions, anything you want to talk about, do drop me a line and I'll be more than happy to get back to you on that. I seem to have managed to fail to get the story onto the laptop. It's on the desktop at the moment, but hey ho, we'll go with that. So what have we got for you today? Well, first story, as I say, is a motorcyclist has been jailed. 5 others have appeared in court due to what was described as antisocial riding as they passed through Sussex earlier this year. Now, the incidents actually took place on March the 28th, and it was a group of around 80 riders who were involved, and their riding behaviour triggered multiple calls from drivers and other members of the public as they were riding along the A22 between Maresfield and Lower Dicker in East Sussex. Specialist officers from the Sussex and Surrey Roads Policing Unit were deployed, along with the Specialist Enforcement Unit, divisional officers, and the National Police Air Service helicopter. The police use what they call vehicle tactics to stop the group, and presumably that means a roadblock. 4 riders were actually arrested, 2 of whom had attempted to evade the police, and 7 motorcycles were actually seized. The group, let me just get the screenshot up. I've got a picture for you here. So that was what they were quoted as doing. Unsafe riding, antisocial riding. I had a look to see. I can't find any offensive antisocial riding around, but the Sussex Facebook page, Sussex Police Facebook page, includes these as examples of antisocial riding: overtaking on double white line, on a bend, weaving through traffic, or undertaking other vehicles. And they say it's all a way of increasing the risk of losing control, potentially causing a collision, which could result in a life-changing injury or loss of life. The first thing I'll say is, the overtaking on the outside of a corner, there isn't always unsafe. If you've got a long clear view and it's a slow vehicle, it can be quite easy to actually overtake around the outside of a bend. So it all does depend on the circumstances, not just sort of a plain definition of what's going on there. But anyway, hey ho. What happened? Police put in a request for dashcam and CCTV footage, and in the event, they got hold of more than 100 hours of video cam and footage. Presumably, they shot some from their own vehicles and the helicopter too. Anyway, as a result, 27-year-old Ilias Bernesco from Islington in London, he was jailed. Police say he was seen riding on the wrong side of the road, riding at excessive speed, mounting a pavement to get through traffic, and using his mobile phone whilst riding. And when stopped, he attempted to run from the police. The reason for that was fairly clear, because he was found to be in breach of a previous suspended sentence, which had been imposed Snaresbrook Crown Court back in December 2019 for dangerous driving, when it was also given a 2-year driving ban. So he was arrested, he was charged with dangerous driving, driving whilst disqualified, and driving without insurance. And he appeared at Chichester Crown Court back in October and changed his plea there to guilty. And he was subsequently sentenced to a year in prison and disqualified for 3 years. 22-year-old Robbie Frampton from Dorset was seen going through a red light. He also failed to stop for the police, also was seen travelling at excessive speed and overtaking vehicles dangerously. He also tried to evade officers, claiming that he panicked when police flagged him down. So he admitted the offences, and he was given a 200-hour unpaid work and 30 rehabilitation activity requirement sessions with the probation service. He also gets a £250 court costs and a £95 victim surcharge, and he was disqualified for 18 months. 3 other riders got various traffic signal and white line offences and got points and fines. And a 17-year-old is also due to appear in court next year for sentencing. He's pleaded guilty to dangerous driving, driving without insurance, and driving otherwise than in accordance with a license. So presumably he was either on a CBT on a bigger bike, or nothing at all. Okay, it's not the first instance of this kind actually in Sussex. In April 2019, another group of motorcyclists was spotted travelling between Kent and Sussex, and weaving in and out of traffic, riding at excessive speeds, and overtaking on double white lines and pulling wheelies along the road. 3 riders were convicted of dangerous driving in this case, and they rather shot themselves in the foot there, because many of the incidents were actually caught on their very own on-bike cameras. So don't forget, if you do have one of those, it's a good idea to stick to the rules, because it will be used in evidence. Right, okay. Next story. With COVID's back in the news again. Well, it's never really gone away, has it? Not since sort of January, February last year. Almost 2 years since we first heard about the disease, and the next variant has emerged. And so if you're regular at BP forecourts, be aware that you will have to mask up, as BP are ramping up their anti-COVID procedures again. They have advised all customers to be aware that face coverings are now mandatory, and their own staff will also be wearing masks behind screens, and also whenever they're out on the shop floor. Only if you are exempt will you be able to not wear a mask. They also ask you to respect social distancing guidelines again in store, and whenever possible to use contactless or mobile payments. And they say they'll be bringing gloves back to the pumps as well, something I've noticed has pretty much disappeared at a lot of pumps recently. Right, okay, don't forget, if you've got any comments, any questions, anything you want to say, do drop me a line via the comment stream. I will try and get back to you during the course of the show. If I can't do it during the show, I will get back to you at the end of the show. Okay, so what else have we got to talk about? Well, the RAC have said that pump prices have got rather out of order. Basically, what they're saying is that the recent drop in global oil prices has not been matched by a reduction in the price of pump fuel. The rapid climb, you'll probably recall, in fuel costs at the pump was actually propelled upwards by a spiraling cost of crude oil. It hit a spectacular low during COVID when everything shut down and people's demand for oil stopped. Then supply was trimmed and prices went up, and but it's come down again. And uh, Brent crude is now around 70, what is it, about $70 a barrel, and it's dropped from a high of 80, which it reached earlier this year. Brent crudes are used as a marker generally for oil prices, and with the drop in the crude price, the RAC believes that E5 and E10 petrol is now around 12p a litre too expensive, and diesel's about 10p a litre too high. And they say the average forecourt price is 147 for unleaded and 150.7 for diesel, although I have to say that that's probably influenced mightily by supermarket discounting, because frankly, if you go to any filling station around here, you'll pay at least 5p a litre more than that. Now, it's long been a complaint that as wholesale prices rise, retailers pass those increases on almost immediately at the pump by raising prices, but they're much slower to bring down prices when the peak is past. And the RSC say that the prices should be around 135 for unleaded and 141 for diesel. And speaking last week, the RAC spokesman Simon Williams said 10 days ago we highlighted petrol was 6p too expensive due to a fall in the wholesale price. And he went on to say basically that petrol retailers who lead the market have stood strong and taken advantage of their customers by collecting bigger profits on every litre they sell than they traditionally do. He says that that basically that it's a 19p a litre profit now to the retailer when their pre-COVID average margin was around 6p. But if there's one group that will be happy, it will be those in government and running the country's finances. The Treasury, of course, imposes fuel duty. That's fixed at 57.9p per litre at the moment. But of course, 20% VAT is charged on the forecourt price. So, as that's a percentage, obviously, with lower prices paid at the pump, less VAT goes to the government coffers. As prices rise, more VAT goes into government funds. Right, okay, so don't forget you can catch Elevenses every Sunday and Wednesday, almost always a live show like today. Very occasionally I put out a recorded one. I may have to do a recorded one next weekend. 11 o'clock, set your watches, set your clock, set your alarms. If you can't catch it live here on Facebook, you can always catch up here later, or you can head over to my YouTube channel and you can find it over there. Don't forget, though, the YouTube channel Survival Skills has a UK on the end of it. You must put that in or you won't find it. Right, okay, so yes, antisocial behaviour, yes. Moving on from that to those stories, you know about the London ULEZ zone, which has now extended out to North and South Circular Road. And something I said in that story was that it's not just a London story; it is going to be happening elsewhere. Now, I'd forgotten at the time that Bath and Birmingham have actually launched their own clean air zones this year. Bath launched in March, Birmingham in June. So the next one to come along after London came into force the other day is Portsmouth. And the good news right now is that whilst there are no plans to charge motorcycles, private cars, or vans. The word currently does appear in the official news release. So there could be changes. Now, right at the moment, the charge does apply to the taxis, private hire vehicles, buses, coaches, and heavy goods vehicles if they're older than the Euro 6 diesel standard, or Euro 4 if petrol. Vehicles meeting later standards will not be charged. The charge is £10 a day. For light vehicles, heavy vehicles, it's £50 a day. And of course, there is a fine, £120 possibly, including the or plus the CAZ charge if you don't pay promptly. Now, why has it gone into Portsmouth? Well, it's been put in place to tackle two specific locations which regularly exceed the legal levels of air pollution. The zone covers most of the city centre. Not too surprising, it's not met with universal approval from vehicle operators, particularly as the zone includes the port. Now, this matters because obviously vehicles transiting Portsmouth to and from Europe will have to pass through the zone, but also locals who live on the Isle of Wight will also be affected. Now, one of the things I've noticed on my own trips to the island is that many of the vehicles actually are rather older than they are on the mainland. Simply because people don't do so many miles driving around what is a fairly small island off the mainland of the British Isles. So they tend to keep older vehicles. They're not so keen to scrap them. They don't go rusty out there either, I think, because they don't use so much salt on the roads. It's very mild over there generally. And this was acknowledged as a problem by a councillor, Gerald Vernon Jackson, who's the leader of Portsmouth City Council. He said, I think the main area of concern has been from the Isle of Wight because the Portsmouth to Fishbourne ferry is the main route for them. It carries a lot of freight traffic, and people worry it's going to hurt the economy of the island quite badly. But he said, we can't design a scheme just for older and polluting vehicles to drive through Portsmouth and get the ferry to the Isle of Wight. One thing I did notice was the start date wasn't the first of a month. It wasn't a Monday. It was actually Wednesday, November the 29th. So I'm sure that caught a few drivers out. Skeptics will no doubt point that the funding will go to the local council, but as far as I know, the Portsmouth scheme is actually unique in that it is planned to be scrapped as soon as air quality returns to acceptable and legal levels. So that's good news. Portsmouth Council do estimate it could take 2 years to get there, although the most optimistic models suggest it might happen in just 1 year. So that'll be interesting to see if they stick with that pledge to kill off the charging zone when the air quality is back. Right, good morning. Clive has looked in. First comment of the morning, but you're all a bit quiet out there this morning. So hopefully the next story will perk you up a little. The live show at the NEC, oops, that's the wrong, zoom in on that a little bit, try to bring the bikes in a little bit more center stage. There we go. You can see those a little bit better now. The NEC Motorcycle Live Show is back. It started for the public at least on Saturday the 4th of December. So that made it your first chance to see the 2022 BSA Gold Star. Now the Reborn manufacturer is launching a 650 single cc powered bike, the one that you can see in the picture here, and it'll be launched under the Classic Legends range, and it'll be built in Birmingham. That's the word, which is of course the brand's original home. Now the name reflects on the original BSA Gold Star range, which ran from 1938 to 1963. The bike was built with multiple engine options, starting from a 350 and going all the way up to a 500cc. They were all single cylinder, as far as I remember. BSA were once the largest motorcycle manufacturer in the world, but they collapsed with debts in the 1970s. I believe the name did appear on a short-lived range of Chinese-built bikes, but don't quote me on that. But Mahindra Group, which is one of Asia's largest automotive and engineering conglomerates, bought the name in 2016. Their owner, the billionaire Indian Anand Mahindra, has said he hopes to resurrect the British motorbike industry. So the bike's been designed in the UK. It's been built in India. It's officially launched at the venue at the weekend, and it's said to retain the classic design of the original model. Now, you'll be able to get hold of it in 5 colours. The motor is interesting. It's a 45 horsepower 650 single with double overhead cam. It's water cooled. The engine has a 4-valve head. There are twin balancers to smooth it out, and the big singles are notoriously shaky if they don't have balance shafts. Peak power comes in at 6,000 RPM, and the bike delivers 41 foot-pounds of torque at 4,000 RPM. So the British design team that is quoted as being responsible for engine development in the press release is Ricardo, I believe. Ricardo have been responsible for engineering a whole range of vehicles, race cars, Formula One. I believe they actually build McLaren's own sort of in-house engines too. I believe also that the engine is actually based on a BMW design, although it's got a change of crankcases. But don't quote me on that. I can't say for sure that that's correct. Now, BSA say the new Euro 5 motor starts to pull from as little as 1,800 RPM, and with the peak power coming in at around about 6,000 and about 45 horsepower, it's very reminiscent actually of my late lamented Honda 650 Dominator, which was a 650 single. And I loved that bike actually, a nice upright riding position. It was great for riding back roads. It was great for instructing on actually. And it had just about enough power to make motorways tolerable. But the thing I really liked about it was, although it didn't produce a lot of power in big numbers and didn't go particularly fast, it was capable of just over 100. It was the way the power was delivered. It was very easy to accelerate rapidly at sort of normal road speeds. It's all very well having 200 horsepower, but you notice I rarely feature bikes like that on this show because they're not really usable on the road. You certainly can't use 200 horsepower in top gear anywhere sensibly. Well, you just end up fronting up with Sussex magistrates, I guess. Okay, does the engine get modern conveniences? Yes, it certainly does. It gets clutch assist and a slipper clutch, but the frame is a pretty traditional looking tubular steel dual cradle. You get suspension from a fairly basic set of non-adjustable forks and 5-stage preload shocks, twin shocks. So again, nothing much going on there. Wheels are an 18-inch, 17-inch combo. Wire wheels, as you can see. You get Pirelli Phantom Sports Comp tyres fitted. The front disc is a 320 millimeter, which should pull it up in fairly good order. The smaller rear, both fitted with Brembo calipers, and of course you get ABS as well. The tank is said to be inspired by the M24 and DB34 Gold Star models, and it holds a modest 12 litres. That's only just over 2.5 gallons. Now, no fuel consumption figures are quoted, but assuming it gets something approaching 65 mpg, which is probably about ballpark, it's about roughly what I used to get out of that Honda, it should give you a range of about 150, 160 miles, but it's not a cross-continental tourer. One thing it does have is one of the old-fashioned stand proud filler caps, which is offset to one side to give it the classic looks. I'm not entirely sure I like that as an idea, but hey ho. Seat height is a relatively low 780 millimeters or 30.7 inches in more traditional units. You get twin analog clocks, but they have a less traditional internal LCD display. One thing that is useful is there's an USB charger mounted actually on the handlebars, which is something that seems to be pretty standard on Indian designed bikes, but is yet to make it to most Japanese and European machines, at least in a place where you can easily plug in a sort of a phone or something. You got the traditional sort of round headlamp, but it does come with integrated LED DRLs, and you get an LED rear tail light. No word on pricing just yet, but guesstimates are £5,000 to £6,000, which would make it a direct competitor to the relatively new Enfield 650. You'll get an option of a standard or legacy edition. The legacy model will get a special silver sheen color scheme, and you get chrome finished fenders, mirrors, levers, and polished engine covers. And presumably that's what we're looking at in this picture. And you get a beaded seat cover as well with a white bead around it. Excellent. Anyway, there we go. That's the new BSA. Triumph also were keen to show off what they say is their 1 millionth bike of the Hinckley Bloor era, which rolled off the production line apparently earlier in the week. It was a Tiger 900 Rally Pro with a one-off silver paint job and graphics. And it was unveiled at Hinckley's headquarters by CEO Nick Bloor, and it was then to be transported to Motorcycle Live to be shown there. And it'll actually go on display at the factory visitor experience. Let's call them visitor centres, didn't they? But they're the experiences, hey. Bloor said, in the 31 years since we relaunched Triumph, we've shaped so many great moments with our fans across the world. It wasn't said whether it was one of the very last bikes to roll off a UK production line, which I assume it was. Most of the Triumphs that you now buy, of course, are built abroad and shipped back to the UK. Meanwhile, Norton, our other newly minted old new motorcycle manufacturer, they've unveiled their first entirely new machine since TVS took the control of the company. It's the V4 Café Racer, and this is also on display this weekend, or the Motorcycle Live show. So if anybody gets any pics of these, do send them to me. I'll be interested to see them. I can always pop them up next show. The V4 CR is based on the 185 horsepower V4 SV, and it says it puts it toe to toe with Super Naked royalty, according to one press release. It's the first bike which is fully designed and built by the new Norton at their newly opened headquarters in Solihull. And it says, until now, Norton's new facility is actually just focused on producing pre-existing bikes. Dr. Robert Henschel, who's the CEO of Norton, says the bike is the next step in Norton's strategic growth plan on its journey to becoming the world leader in luxury handcrafted motorcycles. For my money, well, it's a bike best viewed through dark glasses. I haven't even bothered to put a picture of it up. You can find it for yourself. I think it manages to combine a frightening number of the worst trends in the current custom building world, including the obligatory shortened rear end and a ghastly brown seat. You'll also need a loaded wallet. Although it's going to be cheaper than the V4 sports bike, cheaper is all relative. Speculation puts it at the other end of the spectrum from that wallet-friendly BSA we just saw, with a price pitched at around £30,000. Right, okay. The couple of comments here. Tony says, lovely looking machine. I presume you're talking about the BSA there. Yes, I quite like it. Tony says he was at the show yesterday, and he will provide some photos. That'll be good. Thank you. Oh, he's going again Friday and Saturday on the Honda Owners Club stand. So if you are at the show yourself on Saturday, Sunday, do pop in to the Honda Owners Club and say hi to Tony, who is a regular on here. Right, okay, so the final story for the morning, which I've also managed to leave on the other computer. I'll just find where I've put it. Yes, about blood bikers. Now, I've mentioned blood bikers a few times here in the UK, but this is the first time I've actually heard about a group of blood bikers who are based outside the UK. I'm sure there are some, we just don't get to hear about them. So this group was formed by the usual group of buddies with a passion for bikes as recently as August 2020, and it was put together in Hungary. They say amongst their members they've got office workers, a police officer, and a driving instructor, and they all give up their time voluntarily to help with this group. They do the usual things of transporting blood products, which they say is used for everything from transfusions in babies to treating car crash victims. Interestingly, they put themselves in for 24-hour shifts, which is quite a long time if you're actually out on the bike a lot. And then they take the product where they need it. Interestingly, they're also allowed to use flashing blue lights and a siren in an emergency. They've taken over the deliveries from blood bank employees by providing extra manpower, and they can obviously with bikes they can deliver things with improved delivery times. They can apparently halve the time it takes to get across Budapest in the rush hour. So they started with 5 volunteers and a couple of bikes. They've now got 22 volunteers at 2 bases in Budapest and Debrecen. They have 9 specially equipped motorbikes now, and plus 3 cars. And in their first year, they actually covered 183,000 kilometers, which is a pretty long way. And they responded to 650 call-outs. They also, of course, like blood bike groups in the UK, were very busy during the COVID pandemic. They have had to deliver other products to people. There was 1 month apparently when 1 car covered 17,000 kilometers in the spring of this year. So there we go, blood bikers out in Hungary. It's the first time I've actually heard of a group who aren't UK based. Right, so getting towards the end of today's show, I'm going to talk a little bit about some training principles. Now, obviously, it's my job, so I hope you won't tune out and think this is simply an advert for what I'm doing. But I do want to talk for a few minutes about how training courses are put together. The term client-centered training is very much the sort of the in thing at the moment. But it's important to understand that however client-centered training can be, training isn't just about what you think you need. It's also as much about finding out what you don't know that you need. And this is where having an experienced eye cast over your riding may actually be of some use, because you can spot an issue, that the rider is not actually aware of. But we do need to be aware of the limitations of training that is only what the trainer thinks the trainee needs. Now, all coaching of any sort involves the idea that you're going to change the recipient's behavior somehow or another. And it should be immediately obvious that every rider is different and they have different needs and they have different personal goals, which is it's not always recognized when it comes to rider training. So not all rider training is sort of the same. If you're told what a course will consist of, in other words, that you're working towards known as a fixed program, then in education speak, what you're getting is a course which is trainer or teacher centered. In other words, the organization delivers what the organization thinks is appropriate rather than what the client necessarily needs or wants. The training itself is set by a syllabus which is created within that organization. Now, that's one extreme. We hear a lot about client-centered training or coaching in the modern world. Now, even the DVSA responded to criticism about the rigidity of CBT by requiring trainers to make the course more flexible in order to differentiate between complete novices who've never sat on a motorcycle before and the reasonably experienced riders who are renewing a CBT certificate. But it's easy to put a line in the marketing which says client-centered training. But so when you look at training, the first question that you need to ask yourself is who controls the training? If it's you, then you are looking at client-centered training. But if you're having to conform to a program which is laid out by the training organization itself, a model that's sometimes known as teacher knows best, then you are looking at teacher or trainer centered training. Even if it promises to be personalized, it is still essentially trainer centered. And this is the problem with CBT. CBT, in my experience, nails the instructor into a very fixed process of progressingly the client through a series of exercises, and there's not a lot of room for maneuver. Um, One of the exercises that used to cause the most problems with complete novices with the figure of eight was the figure of eight riding exercise. Now, it's not exactly a regular riding maneuver. I'm yet to see many riders actually ride figure of eights on the road. Um, and it's one that requires actually a fair degree of coordination. But the problem with the way that CBT is put together is that you cannot progress from one module to another unless everything in each module has been elements, they call them actually. Each element has been achieved to what is said to be a satisfactory standard. And if it is, you simply can't move forward. So we used to get a lot of new riders who were really wobbly on the figure of eight because it's actually quite a technical um, exercise. There are a real mix of skills. You need throttle, brake, rear brake, clutch control. You need slow balancing skills. You need to be able to steer, and you need to be able to look where you want to go so that you can actually ride in the circle and actually negotiate the cones. So, a lot of riders found this fairly tricky in a fairly early stage of their riding. They'd either sort of wobble, stall, put a foot down, or they'd just get lost between the two cones. A number of people who rode between the two cones and then sort of vanished off across the car park, completely unable to look over their shoulder and find out where they'd gone. It's quite hilarious to watch sometimes. But so I used to do something rather different. If I had time, I used to set up an oblong box of cones. So basically, what they would do was they would start here, they would ride over there, they would turn a corner and come back again. So it was a very different exercise. But what it does is it allows you to get your balance on the straight bits between the corners. The corners are using the same skills as the figure of eight, but you add those straight bits where people can recover mentally and think about how they're going to achieve the next corner. And of course, when you want to, you turn them around and they go the other way. And then if you really get tricky, what you can do is you can turn it into a figure of eight with square corners. And then finally, when they've got that mastered, then you can go back to the old round figure of eight. But of course, it all needed time. Um, and it was tricky to fit into the really structured way that CBT was delivered. But once you get onto post-test training, then you can change things up. At least you can if you are freelance like I am. Um, there are a number of different approaches. Now, some 25 years plus ago, when I was looking to I had set up survival skills, but I wanted some qualifications basically to work with. I approached a then well-known ex-police instructor who offered an instructor training course. Now, it wasn't cheap, so I inquired about it and promptly got a message back saying that unless I had booked up his even more expensive 2-day advanced course, I wouldn't be at a suitable standard to take his instructor course. So I did actually query how he would know that without me having ridden in front of him. So I did actually offer to take a ride down to his location. It was something over 200 miles away from where I lived at the time. So he could give me an assessment. And I suggested that way we'd both know a lot more about each other. Before we got involved in what kind of course was needed. And he actually dismissed that out of hand and insisted the only way I'd be able to instruct efficiently was actually by taking his advanced course first. So I have to admit, I promptly took my cash elsewhere and I applied for a BTEC instead with another and sadly now defunct scheme. And it was a totally different experience. Rather than being told what to do, I was asked questions. And one of the first things I needed to do was actually provide evidence of prior learning. Now, that amounted to a box file in the end, which was absolutely bulging at the seams. There were written exercises for me to tucked into to get me thinking about training topics and training techniques. And the whole thing rounded off. Some weeks later, there was I had a personal meeting with my assessor, and then finally we got a day of practical work. And there was a very interesting session riding actually whilst being watched by an ex-police trainer, and we were both at the same time being watched by the course assessor. So it was very much more about finding out what I knew rather than the sort of really inflexible version of the course offered by that police instructor. So the first thing anybody looking at delivering post-test training should ask you is, what do you want from my course? And the answers are never the same. If you are a sunny day rider with a sports bike, you're not going to be wanting the same kind of training as a 9 till 5 commuter is going to need if they've just made the decision to ride a bike to work. So we actually need to find out what you want. We need to find out where you're likely to ride. We need to get some information about prior experience as well. You may already have some impressive qualifications. You might be a absolute beginner. Who knows? I don't know until I've asked you that. So if you contact me about a course, that's what I always want to find out as much as I can about your level of experience, what kind of previous training you've done, what kind of riding you do now, what do you want to do in the future. I also try to get you to assess your own strengths and your own weaknesses. I ask you, where you feel happy, where you feel you have weaknesses, and from that point of understanding, I will then try to deliver the kind of training that you want, and that is client-centered training. But how much do I let you control the content? Because that is a good question. And there are two concepts I want to introduce briefly here: free form and structured training. Now, if you drop me a line about a training course and I simply say, let's go for a ride, I'll watch you, and then I'll give you a few tips based on what I see, that is essentially free form training. It's ad hoc, it's essentially unplanned. Now, it doesn't mean that it won't help people to improve to a better standard, but you should spot one immediate problem. If you have a specific issue and that issue doesn't crop up on the ride on which you're assessed, then the assessor, the instructor, the trainer, whatever you like to call them behind you, will not be aware that there is a problem that needs talking about. So if for example, you tend to have a problem with decreasing radius corners, and if the ride that we do doesn't happen to have any particularly nasty ones, and you don't run into a corner sort of offline, going too fast, struggling to stay on the road, then I won't be able to tell you how to deal with one of those corners because I won't have seen it. So the ride that you do from over 2 sessions won't be the same. So what I see on one day won't necessarily be the same I see on another day. And again, the same applies with different trainees as well. So one of the biggest problems with freeform training is that it lacks consistency. Now, structured training is rather different. It's back to that CBT style where you have a particular structure to the course. You eliminate the randomness of the freeform training by bringing in specific ideas at particular times. The training is essentially mapped out and delivered according to a plan. So it's structured. You can bring it in what's most useful to most trainees. You deliver the training consistently because you know what you're going to be delivering and you know when you're going to be delivering it. And it's also quite time effective because you're not trying to work out what needs to be delivered at any particular moment. It's all there in the lesson plan. And because it's consistent, it's easy to set realistic goals that the trainee can achieve. So it does allow for some optimal training to improve the rider's basic efficiency. So basically, if I want to stop you from running into a bend too hot, the sort of things that I would be looking at is to explain the basic principle that we always try to be able to stop in distance we can see to be clear on our side of the road, etc., etc. But I also work on tools that allow us to get that result. So that would be the knowledge skills that would allow us to recognize that there is a potential hazard ahead, the judgment skills that allow us to look at an individual bend and work out how tight it is, and then the machine control skills that allow us to change speed and to make direction changes efficiently for that particular corner. So whilst we can sort of basically understand that riding is a highly repetitive task, we're only doing two things on the boat, changing speed or direction, but we are making those decisions on a unique and individual basis every moment we ride. Um, and of course, no two trainees are the same. So even though I have a structured course, I won't be delivering that course in exactly the same way to each trainee. So if you think back to CBT, for example, um, and you've got four trainees in the playground and you're all going around the cones at exactly the same time, doing exactly the same thing, that isn't how a structured course can work. A structured course can still retain a big element of client-centered flexibility to deliver what the trainee wants to learn, but also what the trainee needs to learn. And that's why I don't have a single size course that fits everybody. If you look at my training, I offer a range of courses, and even when you book a course, a specific course, say you do the performance bends course, I will be looking at your riding background and where you want to ride. Some performance bends courses are run for relatively new riders who probably only acquired a bike in the last few months and realize that they're struggling a bit with bends, and some riders will be much quicker but just want to get organized, better organized round corners. The same techniques are involved, the same skills, the same knowledge, the same assessments of the bends, but we approach the training rather differently. So that's why I always have a discussion with the trainee about what you want before we set out on the road, before I deliver what I think you ought to know to satisfy the requirements of the course that you've booked. All right, okay, so I hope that's made the trainee training a little bit more obvious for you and give you something to think about. A couple of comments. Jeff Glenn has said that he believes there are blood bikes in Australia, and he says he confirms in a second message, yes, set up in September 2019 and inspired by Blood Bikes Scotland. And Clive says, great approach to training and just what my wife needs to get her confidence back up. Sadly, you're a bit too far away from central Scotland. Yes. But hey ho, you never know. I actually have an inquiry from somebody in Scotland. So maybe, just maybe, we can work something out for next year, Clive. Stay in touch and I'll see what can be done about that. Maybe a trip up to Scotland to run a course. Let's hope the weather's nice. Right. Okay. So that's it for another day. Anything else to talk about? Again, I've got the notes on the wrong computer. Where did they go? Yes, here we are. Yeah, okay. Xmas gift vouchers. Yes, having just talked about training, I always make an offer over the December period of some gift vouchers. Basically, you buy a sort of a gift voucher with a sort of a face price, but they're actually worth more than they cost when you redeem them against a training course the following year. Now, I'll put details about that up on my coffee and Facebook pages later today. But so you can use them as a gift for somebody else, or you can hoard them for yourself and save on a course later on. Anything else? If you watched Science of Being Seen on Wednesday, thank you very much indeed. It wasn't we didn't get that many people in, but even if one person watches, I still think Science of Being Seen is such a valuable intervention. I'm going to keep running it, but I do plan on doing something a little bit different for the next Science of Being Seen, which will be first Wednesday in February. So do think about looking back in for that one. The next live webcast is first Wednesday in January, and I'll be looking at filtering. So that's it for another show. If you're out there today, it's a little bit grey, a little bit cold, a little bit damp. Stay shiny side up here in the northern hemisphere, and if you're down in the southern hemisphere, enjoy your spring. All right, thank you very much indeed for looking in. So this is Kevin Williams here. thanking you for watching Elevenses, and I'll get my sign-off outro playing in any moment now. Here we go.